Sports Now, and I'm Marky Bilson, and we're talking to the man who knows all in the Southern Conference. That would be, of course, SoCon John Hooper, midmajormadness.com. And yeah, you had something to talk about here. Zach Irvin from Gate City. He is going to be making his pick, which could be ETSU, or it could be Furman, Wofford, Elon, or Appalachian State. Where is he going to play college basketball? Do you have any insight? Or
I think that Appalachian State, he initially liked Appalachian State, but wasn't, I guess, as high on them after taking a visit there. But so I think he really liked ETSU, and obviously I think it helped that he probably had a relationship or a prior relationship with Patrick Good, having played some ball with him and against him, and I think that will be something that would benefit ETSU, and I think, I think
Hodges, and I mean, he's got 2 years left at ETSU. Of course, now Mladen Armus, after transferring up. And I'll tell you, what bothers me about Mladen Armus transferring up is not necessarily that Mladen Armus wants to transfer up. I think he could play, yeah, at a higher conference. It, I think, is a bit humiliating to ETSU. It bothers me that the ETSU fan, however, has no problem with, say, Brian Nolan interviewing to become the president of AC and try to play. Let's face it, he was playing ahead of somebody who initially signed at Oklahoma State, and, oh, he'll never make it. And it becomes total sour grapes. That I don't like to see. But what were your thoughts on Mladen Armus very surprisingly leaving ETSU to go to, it appears he's going to try to transfer up and play his last 2 years at a bigger school. What were your thoughts there?
Early in his career, Coach Forbes had said that he was among, he was still developing this game, but I think defensively, at a higher level, he could potentially work out. Now, I don't know how many minutes he'll get. I think he's sort of comparable to what White Stanford was, an all-conference player, and of course Armus was an all-freshman player last year. But offensively Walker was better, but they kind of used, they needed a defensive stopper. They needed a player in there to kind of challenge defensively, because Walker was a very good defensive player. So in that way, he's comparable to Mladen Armus. I don't see him being a starter anywhere, of course, but I do think he could probably get some serviceable minutes at a bigger institution. Having said that, it is surprising that he would transfer out of ETSU, given what the Bucks have returning next year and the potential for playing in the NCAA tournament, even though a few days, I guess, before that, Jerome Rodriguez had announced he was leaving. So I think even with that, I think Armus would have kind of been that go-to guy coming back next year.
I know you're not the first guy that has made the comparison of Walker from Samford to NC State and how did that plan out and all this. I'm not sure I'm really ready. 24 minutes, actually had just under 24 minutes a game this past year. And I just start to wonder if, he realizes that maybe he could get more playing time elsewhere, maybe at a larger school. I mean, that's not tremendously a whole lot. And, you mentioned, well, what could he do at a larger school? Look, I just, defensively, you talk about it. He won the VMI game with his block of Bubba Parham. That three-point shot, I can recall that. He was the best center that ETSU had. They're not terrible next year coming back, both 7-footers. But I kind of think that Armus saw maybe there's a place where I can be the star and with 2 7-footers. So I look at that. But by the way, did you see where Dan Earl at VMI, Bubba Parham did put his name in the transfer portal, but Earl is saying, he might stay here, that's not necessarily a done deal. Did you see that, or have you heard anything else with Bubba Parham?
Well, I did hear about that, but I also heard, obviously he was planning on transferring to Georgia Tech. some, scuttlebutt out there that Georgia Tech had actively been kind of trying to get him to come there so, that's kind of an unwritten rule. You don't talk about it much, but it's not really something that's legal, but yet no one reports, another school for doing it.
Mm-hmm. That's too.
Possibly. I haven't heard that, but I did hear that on Parham, that Georgia Tech, was kind of, he was having a good season last year, and they were kind of trying to get him to make the decision to transfer there. And it happens. You'd be surprised at how much it happens with guys at a mid-major level that are very, good to, really good to good players. And they're contacted. They might be directly contacted, or their parents might be contacted by coaches from a Power 5 school to try and convince them to transfer. A few years back in the mid-2000s at Furman, when a guy named Quan Crowell, who was the freshman of the year in the Southern Conference, actually transferred to Auburn because at the time, the year he was freshman, here Jeff Lebo was the coach at Chattanooga, and then Lebo goes and still is, he remembered obviously Crowell and is trying to actively recruit Crowell to Auburn. And, the kid ends up going there, and you've also got the Jason Conley deal back with VMI.
Mm-hmm.
Even before that, in 2002, I believe, with Quinn Snyder and Missouri. As I understand it, from some VMI people, that is the reason that one of the reasons Quinn Snyder actually hired Jason Conley's mother, and that's one of the reasons he was, let go at Missouri and got them in some trouble for that.
Intriguing. I would point this out. I wanted to talk to you, SoCon John Hooper of Mid-Major Madness. Any thoughts on Brian Nolan staying as the president? And now what he's got to do is combat the inferiority complex at ETSU, where what I hear, and I'll say this, people communicate with me online, and I say, I think Steve Forbes, because of his age, blah, 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 is going to stay at ETSU for quite some time. You're crazy. Anybody would like to have him, even though he's been here for 4 years. And it's almost like a source of pride that ETSU would lose their coach. Now, that's an inferiority complex. The other thing that I get, and this also goes into the inferiority complex, I think he's sticking around in waiting until the Tennessee job comes up. Because who in their right mind would ever want to be at ETSU if they could be at UT? And that doesn't speak all that well. It speaks of the subservience that I have often told you about at ETSU. Do you have any thoughts on Brian Nolan? I've never heard of any fan base that was as aware of who their college president was as ETSU fans, and be it Nolan, Stanton, Hicks, whoever. What are your thoughts there, if any, about Nolan staying at ETSU?
Well, maybe they're aware of him because predecessors maybe we're not, so I'm guessing we're not the greatest. So
I think you could easily say that, although they also like to talk about the shiny pharmacy school. And SoCon John Hooper, I used to attend meetings internally, and you would hear faculty members talk about Paul Stanton. He's awesome! And all that. And I think that was sort of that sort of, sometimes the academic and the athletic sides have a difference of opinion on the way things should go about. And I think that was, an extension of that mindset that any college will have. But just please continue. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
I think he, from what I understand, with President Nolan, he relates maybe to athletics more than some presidents might, and that he, this age of presidents, he's not as stoic and stodgy as some of the presidents out there, and he tries to really make an effort to get out to the alumni and the fan base, and probably, tries to keep in touch with athletics as he does the academic side of things. And I always think that's wise for a president to do, and ETSU fan base so much. And like I said, I think that people know what happened before with the de-emphasizing of football and all of that mess. I think that it probably gave the ETSU fan a greater appreciation for the president and what he could bring on the same hand. I think President Nolan understood that and knew that he needed to make a dedication to, engaging the ETSU fan base for every sport and making sure that the fan base knew that he was dedicated to the improvement and the betterment of the athletic program as a whole.
Well, I would agree with that. I do think that, yes, you mentioned he's not stoic. At times it comes out downright goofy. Let's face it, the bow tie, the plaid blue suit of the cheerleaders at the Southern Conference tournament. Yeah, I mean, it endears you to the fans. You know that there's somebody at the faculty senate going, who does he think he is? But I just wonder.
I think about Ken Peacock at Appalachian State was kind of like that. He sort of endeared himself to the App State, and people really enjoyed seeing him at football games and just kind of leading the cheers in the stands and things like that. I think that helps out a lot because there's not a lot of presidents that get out there and put themselves out there and are willing to look goofy, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Well, I will just say this, Paul Stanton, not popular with the Buccaneer sports fans, but he did, after he retired, run for council, Washington County Council, and was elected. And that's like Art Modell getting elected to become the mayor of Cleveland. So when I, somewhat say sometimes, this isn't the greatest sports area in the world, that's an example that I would use for this. Hey, also, along those lines, this has not become the best FCS conference in the world in some time, the Southern Conference. And I see here that there were no players out of the SoCon. There were 7 FCS football players drafted. There were only, by my count, 3 free agents signed. They were from Furman, Bradford Lemons, the punter from Western Carolina, as a matter of fact. Ian Berryman signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers in an attempt to try to make that team. And so Lemons signed with the Chargers. The punter from Western signed with the Steelers. And the Citadel's Noah Dawkins, linebacker, signed with the Seattle Seahawks. Dawkins, of course, was a very highly regarded linebacker. I don't know, what does it mean that only 3 players were signed to free agent contracts? Remember the last year of ETSU football, Brandon Colton signed a free agent contract with the Steelers, although he didn't stick. Is this a sign of the demise of the SoCon as a football conference, SoCon John Hooper?
You wonder because the guy you didn't mention in there is the Walter Payton Award winner, Devlin Hodges.
Yeah.
It's odd. I mean, somebody would... he may not get drafted because, the size is an issue or whatever, but you would have thought he would have got a free agent deal with someone. And that's a little bit concerning. I would say that the 3 players that were selected, I will say, well the 2 of them that were a corner from Furman and a linebacker, very good athletes. In an article that a week before the draft, he ran a 4.37 40, and he's close to 240 pounds or 225, something like that. But that's obviously going to jump off the charts for NFL scouts. Same for Bradford Lemons. He's a good cornerback. He actually started his career at Furman as a wide receiver until his final 2 seasons, and I think he made 14 career starts over his final 2 seasons. So he was a contributor, obviously, but not one of the household names you would see from the SoCon that might get a free agent deal or possibly be drafted in the late round. So yeah, it's concerning. I mean, now having said that, there are a lot of underclassmen that are still probably going to get a shot next year, but for this class, you would have thought there would be more than 3 free agent signees coming out of the league, because I haven't looked at it, but I would imagine that would be on the lower end of the FCS conferences as far as free agent signings, as well as
there weren't a whole lot of guys from smaller schools. I've got the list in front of me and such. In fact, when it comes to FCS programs, I'm looking at this by school, and I think that there were only programs they put one a piece in. But Delaware had one guy, Elon had one guy drafted, James Madison had one guy drafted. So I think there were 7. The breakdown that I saw, and this is a little bit confusing to me, because they said 7 players were drafted out of the FCS, but then they say 1 player out of the Ohio Valley Conference. Well, the Ohio Valley Conference is the FCS. Big Sky Conference had 1. Well, that's SCS. So as far as I can tell, with Fox, I suppose, there were 13 players, as far as I can tell, from the FCS ranks that were drafted, and far more, so I saw Fordham had a lot of players, this sort of, that were signed free agent contracts and such. I sometimes wonder if you're not better off being a free agent, because although I understand a lot of these deals were actually done during the draft, you might have the opportunity to sort of pick and choose where you want to go. I mean, if you are a quarterback and you see that, hey, you know what, they don't have but 1 player signed on their roster, or I'm a defensive lineman, and this team was last in the league in sacks. Maybe I want to sign that minimum contract with where I can play if I've got a choice, because that's going to help me make the team that much better. I can actually analyze where my chances of hooking